Thank you very much, Directors General, Deputy Directors General, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. I think at the beginning, I must acknowledge my predecessors. Minister Jeff Khadebe took a lot of beating about the IRP. It's easy for us to get the credit, take it to ourselves, and not even acknowledge that our predecessors took the beating on behalf of all of us. At the beginning of the term, when I took over as the Minister of Energy, at the beginning of the 6th administration, when we outlined our key priorities for 2019-2020 financial year in the budget vote debate, we highlighted that finalization of the integrated resource plan is one of our key focal areas. So we're presenting it today. We therefore welcome the approval by the Cabinet of the IRP, which actually identifies the need for South Africa to invest into a strong network of economic infrastructure designed to support the country's medium and long-term economic and social objective. I always talk about energy and say energy is the catalyst for economic growth and economic development. Our responsibility with this team and the team sitting there is to prove to the country and the world that energy is the catalyst for economic growth and development. That's why when the Minister of Finance issued the statement, the economic policy statement, we said to him, Minister, please be assured that you will have growth if your mining and energy complex is functional. We're busy with that now. So energy infrastructure is a critical component that underpins economic activity and growth across the country. It needs to be robust, it needs to be extensive, enough to meet industrial and commercial household needs. The first IRP for South Africa, commonly referred to as IRP 2010, was promulgated in March 2011. IRP 2010 identified the preferred generation technology mix required to meet the expected demand growth up to 2030. The plan was developed taking into account government objective towards affordable electricity, reduced greenhouse gas emissions, reduced water consumption, diversified electricity generation sources, localized and regional development. It is within this context that our electricity planning philosophy aims to balance supply and demand while minimizing the cost of electricity and keeping up with the environmental commitments. Now, let me talk a little bit about this thing of low cost, because I pick up, I do monitor this space, that it is abused as a term. That it means there's difference between low cost and cheap. It's not the same. Low cost means you get low cost taking into account the factors around that cost. So cheap means rand and cent. So when you talk of low cost, we're not talking just rand and cent. We talk of low cost, rand and cent, but take into account the context within that low cost is achieved. So other factors are taken into account. I think it is important for us to register that because it is used. Energy sector contributes close to 80% towards the country's total greenhouse gas emissions, of which 50% is from electricity generation and liquid fuel production. As a signatory to the Paris Agreement on climate change, we are committed to reduce emissions from the sector in line with our 2016 intended national determined contribution. The RP is used to roll out electricity infrastructure development in line with ministerial determinations issued under Section 34 of the Electricity Regulation Act. The ministerial determination gives effect to the planned infrastructure by facilitating the procurement of the required electricity capacity. Since the promulgation of the IRP 2010, a total of 18,000 megawatts of new generation capacity have been committed, which is comprised of 9,564 of coal power generation, that is Medupi and Kusile, 1,233 megawatts from water pump storage, that is Ngula, 6,422 megawatts from renewable energy by the IPPs, and 1,005 megawatts of open cycle gas turbine peaking plants currently using diesel at Avon and Tetisa. So that is what is new since the promulgation of the IRP. Besides these capacity additions, number of assumptions in the April 2010 have since changed. Electricity supply and consumption patterns are also changing, with the demand no longer captive to the national grid, which affects the infrastructure planning and technology advancement, and associated decline in costs makes it possible for end users to generate their own electricity. Increasing electricity tariffs have led to energy-intensive users becoming uncompetitive, resulting in reduced production and shutdown in some areas. Unreliable supply due to the challenges experienced by ESCOM is resulting in electricity users looking at alternatives to meet the supplement their energy needs. The assumption in the IRP 2019 to this extent possibly takes into account all these changes. So we do get worried by the fact that in South Africa, every time we see a decline in demand, we celebrate as if that is positive. I am a great believer that once there is a decline in electricity consumption, likelihood is that we are deindustrializing. There are quite a number of intensive electricity users that are not using that electricity, hence the decline. So it's an issue that we are looking at. We are looking into all these issues and factors in the IRP. Key changes to the assumption include, among others, rebasing the demand focus to reflect 2018 actual demand as a starting point. 2, the revision of energy available factors projection as submitted by ESCOM. 3 is the revision of the planned decommissioning schedule to reflect unavailability of some non-performing units due to technical challenges, and updated costs for technologies such as battery storage and import hydro. These are the other assumptions that have been brought into the new IRP. IRP 2019 supports the diversified energy mix. 1, coal will continue to play a significant role in electricity generation as the country has the resource in abundance. First of all, even before we talk of whether we'll use it moving forward, 16 power stations in South Africa are coal-generated power stations. And they're not going to be decommissioned in the next 2 years or 5 years. They're going to be around for a long time, but there are those that are going to be decommissioned because they have come to the end of their life. But we're going to still have a big volume of electricity generation from coal. And therefore, we are cautioning people who say coal is coming to an end. We have 16 power stations that are coal generated. That is the reality that we face today as we sit here. And therefore, coal is going to continue playing a significant role. But we say to new investors on coal, please move towards efficient coal technology, that is high efficiency and low emissions, underground coal gasification, and development of carbon capture and deposit, to enable us to continue using our coal resources in an environmental responsible way. The government will also work with ESCOM to ensure the utility complies with the minimum emission standard over time. There must be just transition towards less carbon emitting technology. Workers and communities in affected areas must, as far as possible, not be less worse off. You will see that when we outline the IRP, we are also proposing in the IRP that there must be a team that specifically think about the just transition. What is this just transition? It's just to do and tinker on the problem. We say no, it should be more detailed, look into economic activities in areas that are affected by decommissioning of power stations. I always make this example, DG, that if you go to Andrina as a town, you close Andrina power station and close Optimum, there will be no town called Andrina, there will be a ghost town. So we must think much broader than just tinkering in the periphery of problems and begin to think deep. And that team is going to be put together sooner than we expected. It is globally accepted fact that nuclear as a clean source of energy can contribute significantly to the reduction of the emissions. There is a move global towards development of small modular reactors that are considered more manageable investment when compared to large fleet approach. So we say we're not going to go large fleet 9,600 megawatts at a go. We're not going to do that. But modular investment on nuclear is necessary in this day and age. The RP 2019 provides for extension of the design life of Quebec. Quebec is coming to the end of its life in 2024. One of the programs is to extend that life by 20 years. And therefore it will take Quebec to 2044. But in the process, we must continue building our nuclear capacity as we move towards 2044. We must not wait until 2044. Taking into account the capacity that will be decommissioned into the future, nuclear will be acquired at a pace, scale, and cost affordable to the country. That is a no-regret option. Now, upfront planning with regard to additional nuclear capacity is therefore requisite given the long lead time. Third area is renewable energy combined with storage present an opportunity to produce distributed power closer to where demand is and to provide off-grid electricity to far-flung areas of the country. The importance of the battery industry is that it will go a long way in addressing the fact that renewables have no solution for the base load. Therefore, development of the battery sector is becoming important if the renewables are going to be competitive in the long term. Now, and in addition to sun and wind resources. South Africa has some of the world's largest high-grade resources in at least 6 key commodities that play critical role in the global energy storage sector. These are vanadium. We have vanadium available in our country. We have platinum, we have palladium, we have nickel, we have manganese, we have rare earths, we have copper, and we have cobalt. So that is the potential new sector of the economy that we can build. And these resources present a huge potential for the creation of new industries and localization across the value chain. The IRP 2019 continues to make provision for significant rollout of renewable energy and storage. Eskom is already working on a utility-scale battery storage, which will allow us to assess the benefits to our power system as we diversify the energy mix. So the point we're making is that a restriction of Eskom from participating in renewable energy is outdated and is not going to be enforced. So Eskom can expand if they want to, but look into all these other sources. Gas to power technology will provide the flexibility required to complement intermittent renewable energy and meet demand during peak hours. Actually, our own prediction as a department is that gas is going to be a game changer in South Africa. Signs of the presence of gas are quite clear. You can look into the MLO Amersfoort area, the gas deposits. You go to Welkom, smaller deposits. You have the Karoo Basin, which is an issue for discussion for a long time, but that gas is a resource we're having. And the discovery by Total is also added to the potential of gas, and there's a lot of exploration happening in our deep sea. So gas is going to be a game changer. We are quite optimistic as a department. And that's why, for example, IRP 2019 makes provision for gas from year 2024. As previously indicated during the budget vote, we intend to establish the first LNG hub in Kuga IDZ in the Eastern Cape province. In support of regional integration and energy trading, South Africa has entered into the Treaty for the Development of Grand Inga Project in the Democratic Republic of Congo, with some of the power intended to be transmitted to South Africa across DRC, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Botswana. In addition to this generation option, providing clean energy, the regional development drivers are compelling, especially given that currently there is very little energy trade between SADC countries due to lack of infrastructure. So the interconnection is important, but developing infrastructure to be world class is quite important. Additional capacity to the energy mix as contained in the IRP 2019 for the period up to 2030 are as follows. In the plan is 1,500 megawatt of generation from coal, 2,500 megawatts from hydro, 6,000 megawatt from PV, 14,400 megawatts from wind, 2,088 megawatts from storage, and 3,000 megawatt from gas. That is what is in the plan. Once the IRP is gazetted as it is going to be done today, then other investors will come to the fore and we will try to expand as fast as we can. It must be noted that while the coal installed capacity will be lower than the current installed base, it will remain the dominant energy supply, contributing 59% of the energy volumes required to meet the demand. Nuclear will contribute 5%, hydro 8%, PV 6%, wind 18%, gas and storage 2%. And I think that projection is understating the potential of gas. But we don't want to do thumb sucking. We must work on scientific figures that are available to us. In recognition of the growing role of the distributed generation and generation for own use, the IRP makes provision for distributed generation. This provision is meant to do away with the need for ministerial deviation for licensing generation of own use for plants above 1 megawatt. This, we believe, will unlock investment in small energy projects from biomass, biogas, landfill, and cogeneration. In addition to the capacity installed, there are a number of implementation issues that will have to be addressed. This includes the development of just transition framework, the changing structure of the industry, including the role of ESCOM and local government, the level of participation by local companies, and previous marginalized South Africans in the energy sector. The IRP recognizes challenges with ESCOM plant performance. There is an immediate supply and demand gap that needs to be addressed. The current load shedding is testimony to this. We urgently need to secure additional capacity in order to increase the reserve margins. Therefore, I would imagine that having now gazetted the IRP, investors will come to the fore. They have options. They must come and invest. You'll remember that in our budget vote, we highlighted to need to ensure proper governments and state-owned entities. We put this as a very strong. We said good governance is the beginning of both financial and operational risk management. If you are collapsing at the level of governance, your operational and your financial risk is higher. So it is for that reason that we can announce that we have completed the exercise of regularizing governance for the Central Energy Fund Group, CF Group. So on Monday, we'll be meeting all those boards. Others are filled up, others are new, but all of them in the CF Group are now regularized. We'll be starting working on the two other groups, that is the NERSA group and NERSA. Where there are gaps, we close them because we think that if we normalize governance, we'll begin to work with the necessary speed. We want to appreciate the fact that the Cabinet has actually approved these boards. We're in the process of finalizing the board and executive management. Actually, I can say that without fear or favor that you see, in that subgroup, all the CEOs are acting. That is abnormal. And we see that as urgent. We must address that. The sooner the better, and have proper CEOs who can take decisions, who can be held to accountable. Otherwise, acting means that if you're not able to change that, you put another one. And that's one area that we want to address. Ladies and gentlemen, that is what we are bringing to you. For questions, this team will answer the questions. All the simple ones, I will answer. All the difficult ones, they will answer. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Minister. I'm sure we're all ready to pose our questions. We will start here in Pretoria. We will start on my right-hand side, and then we'll go to my left-hand side, and then we will go to Cape Town. I am already recognizing 1, 2, Alex, 3, 4 hands here. Can we take 5 with Terence? Can we take those 5 first? You can start, this lady.
Good morning, it's Charlotte Matthews from Mining NX. The first question is that you're going to have a cap on distributed generation. So would you allow 50 megawatt size projects, for example? And the second question is policy certainty. How can you...
Can you speak up a little bit more?
Can you assure investors that you will not go back to them 10 years down the line and tell them they've got to cut their prices, or you're going to be paying them less than you originally contracted? So what kind of assurances can you give? You want to repeat my first question?
Yes, please.
The first question was whether you're going to have a cap on distributed generation. In other words, would you allow projects of 30 megawatts, for example, as some of the mines have got? Thanks.
Okay. Second lady. Alex.
Thank you. Alex Winning from Reuters News Agency. My question firstly is about the coal. Could you say how you've arrived at the 1,500 megawatts? Is that the two IPPs that were already talked about, plus another IPP, or how is that 1,500 figure arrived at? And also there was a section of the statement here which, correct me if I'm wrong, but you didn't read out. There was a part here that talked about, I hope I'm not wrong, there was a part here that talked about an urgent need to address the power gap, and then it said that the government will shortly issue a request for information for new power technologies which will be brought online in the shortest possible time at a reasonable cost. Is the plan still to issue that RFI very soon? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next person, please. This lady, next to Chris.
I was just wondering two things. When is the new CEO going to be announced? Do we have a definitive date on that? CEO of ESCOM, of course. And on the nuclear side...
ESCOM,
yeah. And on the nuclear side, we've spoken of the need to get new capacity and move faster than is indicated in the IRP, if I understood you correctly. What sort of target are you aiming for? Do you know what sort of money you will need, and do you think Treasury will come on board given its fiscal constraints?
Okay, Chris.
Good morning, Chris Yellens from EE Publishers. Just to expand on the question on nuclear new build, I haven't had a chance to read the new IRP, but I see from the press release there is no new nuclear plan to 2030. Can you confirm that that is correct? I further note on page 43, policy position 8 says immediately commence the nuclear build program to the extent of 2,500 megawatts because it is a no-regret option in the long term and in case the Inga project does not materialize. Can you confirm what is the nuclear plan to 2030 and the nuclear plan to 2050? Thank you very much.
Okay, the last one.
There's key engineering views. If you could take us through the main changes as you see them between the draft RP 2018 published in August last year and what the Cabinet approved, both in terms of the assumptions and the mix. And also if you could provide a cost to those changes. So we know what the least cost was in the 2018 RP. We know that you didn't choose that. You went to the base case that deviated from that with additional coal and in the hydro. But with this latest plan, there's changes again. There's batteries from Eskom, for instance. There's additional coal. Could you provide a costing versus the least cost 2018? Secondly, to follow up on what Alex mentioned around the RFI, could you please elaborate on that RFI? I assume that's outside of the allocations under each technology. You're looking for something that's going to be an immediate gap filler. Are you looking to go to the market with a certain amount of megawatts and you want the market to respond immediately? I imagine it under the embedded generation column or something like that. Am I correct? And then what happens now with the large utility scale procurement programs? For instance, the third window 5 of the Renewable Independent Power Producer program and the gas to power program. The last question I have is on the Just Transition team. Is this the same team that Barbara Creasy, the Minister of Environment, is talking about that will fall under the Presidential Climate Change Commission, or are you talking about a team within the PNRE? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll stop there.
Okay. Let me take over. You must be ready to be thrown under the bus. The first question of whether we'll cast prices over the next 10 years is actually a mischievous question. It's not a question per se, it's just mischief. Let me explain why I call it mischief. It's mischief because we're having engagement with bid window 1, 2, and 3 on the prices because we want to adjust the price of electricity for the country. Now, when we do that, we talk to these investors and look into various options so that the impact should not be negative to them. They are looking into options they will throw at us, we'll deal with that. So if you say, can you guarantee that we won't do anything in the next 10 years? You are basically saying the responsibility to manage the economy must be forgone. There can be no such a thing. We're managing the economy. The price of electricity is expensive. Let me tell you, I want you to hear what I'm saying. I'm waiting for that meeting to attend. Now, let me give you this. You know, all the time we're told that IPP is at about R2.20, they are coming down. The reality of the matter is that window 1 PV were paying R4.25 a unit because it was given at 220, but guaranteed increase at CPI. That has moved to R4.25 a unit now. It's unsustainable for the economy. All the intensive using sectors of the economy are battling. Manufacturing, mining, furnaces, all of them are battling. So we have a responsibility to talk to sectors and say, we are running into problem here. How can we help? How can we all take a haircut to make the economy work? So that guarantee that we're asking in 10 years' time is a mischievous question. It says we must not manage the economy. We'll engage any sector, any time, but will not impose things to sectors. We'll talk to them. They must be part of finding a solution, but we'll state the problem to them. So that question talks to that. I'm leaving the 30 megawatt question. The CEO of ESCOM, I think that question should be directed to Minister Gordon, not to me. Even if I knew, I was not going to announce the CEO of ESCOM now because it's not under my jurisdiction. Okay, so it's with Praveen. So ask him when will he announce the CEO of ESCOM. In your IRP, you don't see nuclear up to 2030. Precisely because the IRP before you is what came out of NEDLAC. But consultations continued. And one of the things we're taking into account is that nuclear, you're not going to build it in 2 years. Even if you start a nuclear modular plant, it takes time. There's a lead time before you can see nuclear being factored in the electricity supply. So as we said there, we want to start working in building the nuclear capacity as we are looking forward. You know, when we were doing the analysis, many people said to us, nuclear is very expensive. And we said to them, we agree with you. Nuclear by its nature is very expensive at commissioning and at decommissioning. But once it is operational, it gives you the most reliable, efficient, and cost-effective electricity. As we sit here today, tell me all the stories. We're paying 4.25 cents to window 1 PV. We are paying 40 cents to nuclear. Now, if you say to me, in 10 years' time it's going to be expensive and so forth, projections are projections. They are not actual. And then when you plan, those who will offer to build nuclear will have to make offers that will fit the pace and the price that the country can afford. That is what we're going to. Therefore, in engagement, prices will be negotiated. We'll not just agree to any price that is thrown at us. The window 5. I can see that this thing of window 5, people want to run ahead of us. You're going to have window 5. You're going to have window 20 actually. Okay. You're going to have window 50 because our assumption is that renewables is a technology that is in the economy, is here to stay. It doesn't end with window 4. It will be there for a long time. But if in propagating for renewables, you begin to blackmail everybody else, that it is a movement from coal to renewables, you are mixing issues. Our view is that our economy needs all these technologies. We are in trouble, and if we don't have technologies and will not have secure supply of energy. That's our view. And this IRP built that into the thinking. Just transmission. It's not a renewable, it's not a climate change team that can deal with transmission. We said all the teams, the initiatives that have been taken must be brought together. We must have a team that looks into all aspects of the just transition. And just transition must look into all other elements. So it's not the one on climate change with the Provincial Commission. We'll put that team together, we'll look into just transition and develop the details on that. DJs. One of he's up. Also, who is on?
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. I think there was a question that was raised twice, if not 3 times, about the RFI with regard to deal with the gap filling. I think as we all understand that part of this exercise was to make sure that when we do our request for information or even for procurement regime, we must have some very scientifically based assumptions that we can base our intervention into this space effectively. Now that this exercise has been concluded and also gazetted, we are going to be sitting down together with our executive authority, our minister, to look into the product that we have delivered and start identifying different sizes of interventions that we need from the markets. This intervention is very fundamental to stabilize our generation of the required power as an immediate intervention by the state. So we'll be doing that exercise. Some of you will recall that this exercise was actually started, but we put a hold on it so that we can conclude this exercise, which we have since concluded. will then determine the nature of the information that we need, from which energy mix that we expect that information. But also what should not be lost as we do our analysis, we'll then be making sure that also policy adjustment considerations that we have made the reference to are also taken into account. Honorable Minister has spoken about, for example, a treaty that we have with the INGA project, where some also assumptions and generation of power, we need to look into various deliverables into that and make sure that when we do the determinations that the Minister will be doing, it's in line with the gazetted RP scientific modeling that we have done so far. So this is what is going to be informing our request for information. So it's an exercise that from now onwards, as the technical team, will be sitting down and accordingly advising our Honorable Minister how to go about doing that. We are also not going to be quiet about what has been done. We'll be sitting also with the IPP team that was involved with some aspects of that in the past and make sure how do we realign the new process that we'll be engaging on moving forward. I'll ask DDG Mpele to deal with the issue that has been raised around other aspects. Thank you.
Thank you, DG. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to be responding to 3 questions. I'm going to be responding to 3 questions. The question on the own generation cap, the question about how did we come to the coal capacity, and then there was a question around the changes between the previous plan and how it sort of compares to the previous plan that was published in 2018. The first question around the cap, it is clear in the plan that we have not put a cap, but we are very clear that it's generation for own use. I think it answers the question about the 30 megawatts. The second question around how did we come to coal, it was not any adjustment. It came in on its own merit. I think and it was not specific to any project. And the biggest change, actually, which answers the third question, the biggest change between 2018 plan and 2019 plan is that we had to go and reconsider some practical aspects. One of the biggest aspects we had to go and reconsider was the aspect around how quick can you get gas in and how much of gas to power can you get by 2030. Well, obviously, when you do that, it affects the options available and it makes other options that have got a shorter lead time kick in. And that's actually how coal came in, because it had a shorter lead time compared to other options. And then insofar as what is the price path trajectory difference, I think in terms of what we did, I think it varies for the period between now and 2030, it varies between 2 cents and about 6 cents additional, because the previous plan had assumed you have unlimited availability of gas. Once you start limiting that, you see other technologies as well not coming in because they have to complement each other. So basically that is the basis of the plan. And I think I've responded to the one around how does it change the price path. I think it ranges between 2 and 6 cents additional because of the constraints that you suddenly impose. And I have to emphasize that even the coal that's in the plan, it is still within our emissions limits of the peak plateau decline. So it does not violate that because it's always a constraint that we impose on the plan.
The only outstanding question is whether nuclear is going to be picked up by ESCOM. Meaning that whether ESCOM will pay for nuclear. The only power station we're having in South Africa is an ESCOM power station. So ESCOM is given the freedom to acquire energy generation within the provision of the ARP. If they want to acquire nuclear, they will acquire nuclear. If there's an IPP that wants to develop nuclear capabilities, we'll look into that.
Okay, left-hand side of the room. I see the first hand here at the front. Second and third. On the left-hand side of the room, please. Second. Anyone else on the left-hand side of the room? Okay, then we'll take the gentleman at the back there on the right-hand side of the room. Can we take those three and then we'll move over to Cape Town?
All right. Good morning, Minister. Moluko Mloto from ENCA. As you continue to engage the players in the renewable, the independent power producers for them to reduce the prices, should they decide not to agree with you, what recourse do you have? Does that include possibly going to court in the interest of ensuring that we have, as you manage the economy, all of us get to benefit? But still on the issue of renewable energy, and you said that renewable energy is here to stay. Is there a desire on the side of government to have its own wind and sun sources, where you will own such sources? Let me come to the fact that we have had load shedding in the past few days. Were you informed as Minister of Minerals and Energy, or you were caught by surprise like most of us? The last question is about the fact that early this year, when Eskom announced that it was going to advertise the tender, the multi-billion rand tender for coal to supply its mines in Mpumalanga, we suddenly saw the coal miners increasing their prices. Obviously, they are concerned about, it was about the bottom line. Do you get a sense that, considering the fact that Eskom is financially in a precarious position, and them increasing these prices, perhaps they are greedy, they all care about their bottom line?
Thank you. The lady here. Yes, ma'am.
Antoinette Slabbert from Rapport. Good morning, Minister. Can you please just... Can you not hear me?
Have a machine there. Talk to it.
Can you hear me now?
Just raise the
Can you speak?
Okay.
Yeah.
Good morning, Minister. Antoinette Slabbert from Rapport. Can you give us a bit more detail about the extension of the life of Koeberg? Are we talking about both units? How big is such a project? When will it start? How long does it take? And then the media alert spoke about 9 interventions. Do I understand correctly that those are policy interventions from the least cost scenario? Could you perhaps give us what the 9 interventions were? And then lastly, do you think the current regulatory environment is adequate, or are there specific things that have to be looked at, especially in the light of the court applications of Eskom against NERSA?
Okay.
My name is Konati. I'm with Daily Maverick. Mr. Mantashe, can you perhaps tell us the extension to Koeberg that you spoke about? How much more is it supposed to add to the design life of that power station? And it seems to me that the government has now, with all of these renewables coming on here and very little coal, has actually outsourced the infrastructure provision for energy to independent power producers, renewable or not. And I'm not complaining about that. Can you just confirm that the government itself does not have the means to pursue further investments, particularly into baseload stations? And can you also just summarize, at about 2050, how much installed capacity will this country have, generating capacity? Thank you.
Thank you. Panel.
the last.
Cape Town.
I'm going. I'm going to get the energy. I will answer two questions in one. We're talking to window 1, 2, and 3 of the renewables. Equally, we're talking to coal producers to reduce their price of coal. At least we want to have a cap on the price of coal to ESCOM, because the intention is not to kill coal producers, but is to ensure that at least they make their money, but they don't make obscene profits because of the pressure. So we're talking to both window 1, 2, and 3 of the renewables. We're also talking to coal producers at the same time. So at the end of that process, only can we talk to ESCOM and NERSA about administered prices. We've been talking about administered prices, which means reduction of electricity price to key sectors of the economy. That is the overall plan. So that links your question on coal to that of the renewables. We said in the RP we are allowing ESCOM to have the freedom to get into renewable energy space. That is a government entity. So if you ask whether government has the desire to acquire wind and sun resources, government as government doesn't own any generation. ESCOM is a state-owned entity, and we say it must have the freedom to expand its interest to renewable energy. That is the state. Now, extension of life of Quebec. ESCOM is the owner of Quebec. We're talking to them about extending their life. There is capacity to extend that life by 20 years to 2044. And we think that it is advisable to do so. When you extend that life, you are not acquiring new capacity. You are extending the current capacity by 20 years. That's why we add that the process of acquiring modular station for nuclear is also important, so that we look beyond 2044. Is the regulatory environment adequate? I'm leaving that for the DJ. Are we outsourcing electricity generation? We're not outsourcing electricity generation. We are diversifying sources of electricity generation. And I can tell you, business are not into electricity generation because they are a welfare organization. They are a welfare organization. They are extending that because they see opportunity to make business in electricity generation. If that happens, we're saying that space is created, they must make business there. So it's not outsourcing. Connected capacity is 45 megawatts, 45,000 megawatts. But functional is 35, 37. And that gap is quite important in terms of our ability not to have load shedding. So we've connected 45, but functional 37, 35 megawatts, 1,000 megawatts. Outstanding questions, TJ?
Thank you, Honorable Minister. If I were to deal with police interventions, and most of that information you will also find in the media statement that the Honorable Minister has made reference to, that over and above the scientific assumptions that have been made in terms of different energy mix that we have identified, we have also considered various policy assumptions as part of the just transition period that we are in. And obviously, the Minister is empowered by our Act. At any given moment, he may be able to intervene and make the necessary determinations should there be a challenge with the security of supply. Remember, these are scientific assumptions, and at times they may not be exact. So our responsibility is to watch them closely. And all those areas also, if you go to the document that has been published, you'll find that there's a specific section that deals with policy considerations. It touches upon all those areas, wind and PV, coal as well. It touches on it in terms of our just transition, and the minister has dealt with that matter quite sufficiently. Also, gas to power. Some clear assumptions are made scientifically in terms of 1,000 for 2023 and 2,000 to 2027. But as minister has indicated, gas might be a game changer, and this is a very dynamic environment, and at times it's determined by supply and demand principle. And as that happens, we are therefore not fixed in a box where we keep them as they are. At any given moment, the minister may be able to make the necessary policy interventions in areas where demand has increased and accordingly make the necessary determination. So it's a very dynamic environment, but those policy interventions, they exist within the document so as to provide minister with the powers vested in him in terms of the Act, should the necessary intervention be required to ensure security of supply as part of our strategic responsibility. The issue of regulatory framework is quite a very risk one, Minister. But the fact of the matter is that this sector is very dynamic, and the technologies that are being used in this sector are also changing from time to time. As we speak, somebody is sitting somewhere developing a technology, particularly in different areas of our supply. Our framework for now is quite rigid, in my view. And one question was about, for example, the embedded generation that different municipalities, different private sector organizations, mining companies, that they may want to use. And our regulatory framework needs to be flexible to some extent to accommodate the new approaches that we are beginning to deal with. The question around the scale as well, scalability of those generations, to what extent should we allow that space, how to monitor and manage that space, and also to make sure the security and also the reliability in terms of complying with certain standards that are set. So it's a very important aspect from time to time to revisit and review our framework to make sure that it is in line with fast developing technologies globally and domestically, to make sure that in our framework we don't find stuck with rigid approaches as determined by our framework. So at the moment it's slightly rigid, but we are beginning to look into it with new approaches coming into our fore to make sure that our space becomes flexible without compromising the safety and security of our consumers. Thanks, Minister.
Okay, down.
Okay, Cape Town, would you like to pose any questions for the panel? Hello?
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
We've got 5 questions.
Okay.
Thank you. Good morning, Mrs. Moimoni, Jan Nipa for Marula Media. 3 to the panel. I have 5 questions. The first is, we heard a lot about the Browpara Basin from the President last year. We have heard very little since. What is the situation there? Do we have any idea of what the size and extent of that deposit is? Secondly, building on the coal question, but perhaps expanding it a bit, is there a cap on the amount of renewable energy that can be built every year? And any other source of energy, whether there's a cap? Thirdly, turning to cost, what is the assumed rand-dollar exchange rate that you used in your cost analysis? Fourthly, and building on that, what is the cost of gas to power per kilowatt hour that you assume? And finally, just in the short term, are you looking at solving current supply problems by using so-called power ships, those barges that hold gas-powered power plants?
Okay, Cape Town,
My name is Fido Schnabel.
Okay, go on.
My name is Fido Schnabel. I'm from Sapia. I saw in the table 5 for solar PV a gap in 2024 and 2026 and 7. I would like to ask why this gap is there, and just say that encouragement for investment to manufacturing and industrialization will not be very advanced if there's these kind of gaps. So I'd just like to understand why there are these two gaps.
Okay, the next one.
Most of the, as far as I know, the small modular reactor technology is a cyclical one that attracted a lot of investment in the US. But the licensing of these projects has been dragging on for many years. Is it safe to rely on nuclear, on the nuclear in our current IRP? Because that's uncertainties around this new technology.
Okay.
Okay, Louise from 2024. My question is also about a small modular reactors. I might have missed it, but does government have an idea of who could possibly assist in building these? Rosatom from Russia is known for this kind of technology. And in terms of the analysis done on nuclear energy, who has SA been reaching out to? Has SA maybe been reaching out to Russia for advice in that regard?
Anyone else?
It's Carol. Hi, Tony. It's Carol Payton from Business Day. Could you please tell me, in terms of the urgent round that you're planning to do, the urgent procurement round, could you perhaps tell us how many megawatts you think need to be urgently procured? And then secondly, when it comes to, I just want to clarify, just check that I've got the right understanding of what the DG was saying. So you're saying these are the amounts of megawatts we're going to add. We're still going to sit down and decide when and place those. Is that correct? And then thirdly, what are you saying about the price of electricity in the IRP? Where do you see that price trajectory going? Thanks.
Okay.
That's it for now.
Okay, that's it for now.
Thank you, Cape Town. The Total find, Total is a company, it's a private company, very commercial, very international. Therefore, if they say they found gas, they are working on it, we don't interfere with that process. We allow the company to develop the find. All we can do is to send a message to them that, listen, it's in our interest to develop that gas find. The sooner, the better. That's all we can do. But we cannot go to Total and say, do this at this time, this way. We allow them to develop it. We are excited. If they want us to facilitate aspects of developing that find, that is our responsibility. Cap on renewables, in the IRP, there are annual caps on renewable development, and that remains in the IRP. Cost of gas, let me leave that to you, Jacob. And then we go to licensing, dragging on. One of the things that we have committed ourselves to the South African society is that we are working day and night to make this department responsive. So we want to deal with dragging of licensing and other processes in the department. We're hard at work. We say, the first is to change the attitude that when people go to our department, they're not doing us a favor, we're not doing them a favor by talking to them. So this department must be responsive. We want it to be as responsive as if it is collecting tax on people who come to the department. So that is what we are hard at work with. It is not as easy as we think. We're working with people, we have cultures that are embedded in the department. We want to change that attitude and be responsive to the last question. I want to answer is, you see, the sooner as South African society, from all of us, like media, everybody, we can change being cynical, the better will we do. Now, if you say whether we are giving an advice from Russia on the design of the nuclear, that is a cynical question, because you are referring to the last debate on the Russia-South Africa nuclear program. That is not what we're talking about. We're talking of acquiring nuclear at a pace and cost that the country can afford. At this point in time, IRP has been approved on Wednesday. We're gazetting it today. Only now will we start doing practical work on the provisions of the IRP. So we don't have Russia sitting somewhere doing designs for us. We are going to be talking to as many people as possible. People will come to our office and talk to us. Mbele. Agent megawatts, once you start having load shedding, you must know that there is need to increase capacity. But we don't have a preference of a particular technology to provide those megawatts. When people come to the fore, when we look into the possibilities, we'll work on those megawatts. But we can't wait until we lose it. That's what the mistake we committed from 1998. We warned that the electricity over surplus capacity was going to end in 2007. Government dragged its feet and only started the build program in 2004. Hence the problems in Medupi and Kusile. If we started the build program early, we wouldn't be having those problems. So we'll look into all the options at our disposal. But
thank you, Honorable Minister. There was a question around the rand-dollar exchange rate that was used in the plan. We used around 13 rand 50, 13 rand 60. That is the exchange rate that was used. The second question was around the cost of gas, but in per kilowatt hour. In terms of the model, you don't put the price of energy, you put the price of inputs. So basically, you get various technology costs in terms of the different gas engine types or technologies, and then you actually also put in the cost of the fuel, which is the gas. And in the current IRP, we had assumed the cost of gas to be $10 per gigajoule.
Yes, I'm going to answer the questions around the power ship and the role it will play in the current IRP. And I want to link this to the RFI that Minister referred to. When we did the modeling exercise, we recognized that in the first 4 years, so if you look at the last column of the IRP table, in the first 4 years, we identified that there will be a gap that needs to be met. And this is based on the low EAF that we had received, EAF numbers that we had received from Eskom. So to avoid utilization of high costly diesel power plants, we have crafted an RFI that we want to issue to the market. That RFI will then give us the information on other alternative options. And that's where possibly the power ship, if it comes cheaper than the diesel-fired OCGTs, then power ship will have a role to play in that regard. We're not looking at power ship alone, hence we issue in the RFI to find out from the market what other options are there available to us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think now I'm afraid we've come to the end of the briefing.
Technical question,
Sorry,
which is
there's
just when
one more question we didn't get out.
Okay, can we?
Sandy,
Yeah?
I didn't get an answer to the question of
Oh.
where is the price path of electricity over the next 10 years? Where do you see that going, please?
Okay, in terms of the exercise that we do in the RP, we don't necessarily project the price. It's a comparative exercise because you look at various options. And I think it's the question that I responded to earlier because it's indicative. The question that I responded to earlier when I was asked about how is the current plan from a cost point of view comparable to the previous plan, and I indicated that it actually there's an additional between 2 and 6 cents to the original plan that was there. I mean, the price in the future is a function of many things, which at this point in time they can change. So one cannot say that it will be 1 rand or 2 rand or, but what you can surely say is that the plan will, as it is put forward, it's the least practical cost plan on the table.
Thank you. I'm afraid we do have to close. Colleagues, you are welcome to send all your questions to the department, media desk at energy.gov.za. The document is now on the website. Yes, it is now on our website as well as that of the Government Gazette. And we have some refreshments for you in the area as you go back to your right-hand side. Otherwise, we'd like to thank you very much for having made the time to be here, and the Minister and the IRP team and the DGs for the support that they provided. Thank you.